Hello, everyone out there. My name's Clay Wirestone. I'm the Kansas Reflector's opinion editor.
I'm Sherman Smith. I'm the editor.
And we are here to kick off week 5 of the Kansas legislature's session. I have an admission to make, which is that I have largely been off last week and will be largely off this week, working on secret things.
You can pre-order his book.
That's true. I'm proofreading that. Yeah. But so Sherman is here and in the unenviable position of having to catch me up on all of the stuff that happened at the legislature during its 4th week. So Sherman, hit me. What do you got?
Yeah, everybody was sane and calm and collected, and they considered thoughtful legislation. And no, I'm just kidding. That never happens. One of the big stories was the crusade against DEI and critical race theory, or whatever Republicans think it is these days, whatever those words mean. In the House Education Committee, there were several Republicans, Representative Christy Williams out of Augusta, Representative Bob Lewis out of Garden City. You may remember Lewis is the one who ran the amendment for the bathroom ban a couple weeks ago. They floated this bill that would ban DEI and critical race theory in college courses, and also impose certain types of curriculum into colleges. They call this the Freedom from Indoctrination Act, but what they're really trying to do is dictate the subject matter that's being taught to college students. They think that all the college professors are liberal, and I think Lewis called it a washing machine, or they're just trying to, impose some sort of ideological purity on kids. There's not really evidence of that, and of course what they're doing is exactly what they're accusing colleges of, dictating what they can and can't say.
Now, what happened to this bill in the hearing? Did it pass? Are they still working on it? What's the status?
They just took testimony on this bill and talked about it, but then a day later, in a budget committee, they inserted some of these ideas into the budget in terms of and they call it budget provisos. So in order to get the money, you have to do certain things. And so what they want to do for higher ed is freeze tuition. They want to reduce the need-based student aid. They want to slash administrative costs by 10%, fast track the firings of tenured professors. And to get a big chunk of the money next year, they're going to have to certify that they don't have DEI or critical race theory in their courses.
And again, this is all part of the process, the legislative process, such as it is. This is a budget recommendation. It's in a House committee at this moment. There are many steps still to go on how any of that would actually become law.
Well, it's funny you say that, because something else that came up this week was process, which is a word we try to avoid reporting on because it can be really dull and tedious for those of you who do not have the pleasure that we have of sitting through hours-long debates in the Statehouse every day. But in terms of process, when you have supermajority power, the rules are whatever you say they are at any moment. And so typically, yes, you'd have a bill, gets a hearing, there's plenty of time in advance to know the hearing is going to happen. People on both sides get to come and say, this is why it's a good idea or a bad idea, whatever they want to say about it. The committee then would come back at least a day later, again, letting everybody know they're going to do this. They would take action on the bill, which means they debate it. They might try to amend it to address concerns, and then they would take a vote to move it out of committee. Then it would get to the floor in that chamber, similar process where they could debate it, amend it, and take a vote to pass it out. And then it would go to the other side, and this would start all over again at the committee level. What we're seeing increasingly are actions that are being taken that never show up on the calendar. They're doing this in secret. They all know themselves that they're going to take a vote on a bill the next day, but nobody else in the public knows. We saw this happen this week with legislation. Again, in the House, they had to declare an emergency to do this because it had never gone through the committee in the House, but it's a Senate bill that tries to make it clear that immigrants are not able to get public aid, and in particular, there was a sticky provision in this that dealt with in-state tuition for immigrants who have lived here their whole life. And so this did not show up in the calendar. There was no public notice that they were going to do this. By the rules, they can't do this. They had to declare an emergency to make it happen. They bring it to a debate until the Democrats get up and start complaining about the bill. And then they use another rule to say, yeah, actually, we're silencing debate because we're tired of listening to you complain about what we're doing. Nobody's allowed to talk about this anymore. We're just going to vote and kick it out.
Well, and to be clear, too, and we're talking about this, and, this happens regularly in different contexts, too, this declaration of an emergency, which is often used to facilitate final passage of a bill, because, again, you're supposed to wait 24 hours to have another a final vote after the first vote. As it's just routine these days that they call for emergency final passage. Mm-hmm. So this is an expansion of how you use these quote unquote emergencies in the chamber. And of course, with very rare exceptions, they are not emergencies. None of these are emergencies. Like right. Any usual definition of that word does not apply here.
Yeah, I mean, I remember covering during the pandemic, I think that was a legitimate emergency. That's what the rule is for. Like, we have to get our work done right now and get out of here because there's a deadly virus sweeping through and we don't know what it's going to do. Now it's just whenever we want, we'll declare an emergency so we can do whatever we want. And it's a reminder of two things what happened in the House. One is that anything can happen at any time in terms of any bill. Nothing is ever dead, nothing goes away. It can always resurface in any number of ways. The second interesting thing, because Republicans actually stripped the ban on in-state tuition for immigrants out of this bill, it's what that tells us is the Catholic Conference has more power than the leadership in the legislature, because the Catholic Conference, right before the House went on the floor, sent a personal note to every member of the House that said, we want you to take this out. And so they did.
And, again, I was at a press conference a couple of weeks ago now with the Democratic minority leader in the Senate and the House, Dinah Sykes and Brandon Woodard, respectively. Someone asked Dinah Sykes, one of the other reporters, if she could remember when there had actually been an emergency that would require kind of emergency treatment. This was in reference to the anti-transgender bathroom ban, which we're going to be talking about more about soon, don't worry. But they were asking, had there ever been an actual emergency where they had moved in a similar fashion? And Senator Sykes said the only thing she could remember was a couple of years ago when there was like an oncoming ice storm or something.
And we had that deep freeze where the natural gas price skyrocketed and they needed to rush aid out to communities that couldn't afford their gas bills.
Right. And so there were, so there are occasionally times like that when you could legitimately say it, but talk about an emergency, but not often.
Yeah. These days it just means we're trying to hide what we plan to do and not let anybody know about it.
Well, and this is an important point too, not to belabor this, but we have seen in the past, certainly since my time back in Kansas and working in the legislature, and I've been to the legislature on and off for basically the last 9 years now, and when people want to, they can really make a fuss in the legislature. I'm talking about the people of Kansas. When the teachers come out, when the KNEA,
the so-called red shirts,
right,
used
really
to scare Republicans.
Yes, and ditto for LGBTQ people, for folks across the spectrum. If there is advance warning, or if there is advanced knowledge of what's going to happen in the State House, those votes can be made very uncomfortable for lawmakers. And I think a lot of them just don't want to deal with that.
Yeah, they don't want to have to look people in the face as they pass legislation that is going to hurt them.
So specifically now, moving on to some kind of the after effects, so to speak, of that bathroom ban, you guys were covering some of that on Friday.
Yeah, so on Friday, a group of about 50 trans Kansans and their allies showed up at the State House to protest this this bathroom ban. And what they did was they used restrooms as though they were following the law. The law hasn't taken effect yet. Governor Laura Kelly is expected to veto it. There would have to be an override of that veto. We'll see how that plays out. But the requirement under that law is that you have to use the restroom that aligns with your sex assigned at birth and not your gender. And so we saw trans men with beards having to go to the women's room, and people who you would recognize as a woman on the street going into the men's room. And they spent a lot of time on the first floor of the State House, going in and out of a restroom there just to make this point. This happened on a Friday when there was very few people in the State House. I think only one or two committees were meeting, so there wasn't much risk of confrontation, but they could make this point, and it gave them a chance to speak about what they were doing. Our reporter Anna Kaminsky wrote about this for us. Later, after they used the restrooms, they all went up to the old Supreme Court room where one of these committee hearings were taking place so that they could all file in. And I think it was perhaps a surprise to the committee members to see suddenly dozens of trans people walking into their room. There wasn't any drama or confrontation, but it was a way for them to make their presence known.
Well, and again, just to emphasize with where we are with this right now, that bathroom ban has passed the House and the Senate. It is now going to Governor Laura Kelly to either veto or sign or allow it to become law without her signature. It is widely expected that she is going to veto the bill, which means that it will then go back to the House and Senate, and both chambers will have to vote again. The bill passed with very wide margins, so I don't necessarily expect that veto to be upheld, but we will see.
I think that we're still reporting on this. Morgan Shilson, who covered that debate, has been talking to the people associated with agencies that represent governments. So trying to find out, how exactly do you enforce this bill? How would you implement the requirements in this bill? There are a lot of unknowns. Even attorneys who look through this go, we don't quite understand what's happening here, how it's supposed to work. So there is an opportunity perhaps for, we had one Republican, Mark Schreiber of Emporia, voted against this. If there were four more who said, actually there are real problems with this bill, or I've learned more or developed a conscience in the past 2 weeks, perhaps the veto would fail, the veto override would fail. But as Clay says, the votes are there to override it.
So let's now turn into this week, which is going to be week 5 of the session. So what's on tap for this week, Sherman?
The House has scheduled debate Monday on this resolution from the Senate to declare October 14th a day of honor for Charlie Kirk. It's supposed to be about promoting free speech to honor Charlie Kirk. Interesting, on the Senate side, when Democrats started to quote Charlie Kirk, Senate President Ty Masterson got very unhappy about that and shouted them down. So, we'll see if there's similar irony over free speech when the House takes this up.
Well, and as I'm writing for today, I think it's interesting that Kansas has its own homegrown free speech champion in terms of William Allen White, the famed editor of the Emporia Gazette, who actually won a Pulitzer Prize for his editorial To an Anxious Friend, which was about free speech. And I don't believe that we have a William Allen White Day in Kansas. So
we do have a William Allen White statue in the State House, though. So
we do.
Perhaps they can erect a Charlie Kirk statue somewhere, too.
It is a very large William Allen White statue, incidentally. You don't want to be around that when things get wobbly. What else? What else is going on, Sherman?
Yeah, a lot of stuff in the calendar that I think is interesting. The Senate Committee on Government Efficiency, or COGE, which they did because it rhymes with Doge, which is cool, apparently. They're taking up a number of bills this week. One of them that appears on the calendar is an effort to give cash awards to employees who report fraud, waste, and abuse. Sort of a snitch program. Tell on your coworkers, and we'll give you money for it. Curious to see how that works. And then on the House side, in the Transportation Committee, they want to take up a proposal that would require commercial vehicle drivers to be proficient in English.
And then also, finally, the big story kind of that looms behind everything all the time is the one thing that the House and Senate actually are required by law to do this session, which is to pass a budget. And Sherman was just talking a little bit about some chatter about the budget for colleges and universities in Kansas, but that whole thing is happening, continuing to happen in the background.
Yeah, we expect that the House could, at the committee level, work a budget this week, maybe even get it onto the floor. The mandate from leadership from House Speaker Dan Hawkins is to cut $200 million in spending.
And I had originally heard at one point a couple of weeks ago that they were hoping to get a budget passed out of the House by February 6th. We have passed February 6th at this point, so we'll see what happens.
Yeah, maybe worth noting that this just tremendous pace of action that's happening in the State House right now and the rush to get the budget out is because they want to end the session as soon as possible, perhaps early March, maybe late March. They want to get it done as quickly as possible so they can get on with raising money for their campaigns and hitting the campaign trail.
Well, to learn about how all of that unfolds this week and in the weeks ahead, please subscribe to our newsletter at kansasreflector.com/subscribe. As I say this, those words will be appearing roughly right here on your screen. kansasreflector.com/subscribe for our newsletter, which comes out every day, every morning at 4 a.m.
It's a free newsletter, and if you're not familiar with our work, all of our stories are always free to read.
And the newsletter will come to you 7 days a week, 365 days a year. So until next time, friends, thanks so much. I'm Clay Wirestone.
I'm Sherman Smith.
Bye.
Should keep that.